Hi guys! It is the last week of work, yay! Alright, so today is your video for days 27 and 28. You are going to be using the information from your previous section with polynomials and what we've been doing all year, which is solving equations. So we have a new word that we're going to be calling our polynomials, and it's called a quadratic equation. So I want you to think about if I have a polynomial and it's in the form of an equation, which in the other sections it wasn't. It was just an expression. What we're going to be doing with this section or with the sections for the rest of this week is if I give you a polynomial, there's a particular method that you're going to use to figure out the two solutions that are the value of x. All right, so again, we're solving it to figure out the values of x. There should be two values of x. The very first section, which you're getting into today, is if I give you a polynomial and I set it equal to 0, or it's already set equal to 0, how you would be able to factor or use the factoring method to figure out the two solutions. All right, so I already previously recorded the video for this lesson, so I want you to go ahead and jump to that. Because it's such a nice day outside today, the neighborhood is just a little bit louder, so I hope that you can't hear it, but in the case that you can, I apologize, and hopefully I'm louder than whatever you're hearing around me. All right, so let's get started. So your new packet starts a whole new chapter, and we're going to be dealing with something called a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation is just an equation representing what's called a non-linear equation that can be written into standard form. So I want you to think of a polynomial set equal to 0, because a polynomial is usually in standard form, right? And let me show you what I mean. If I had a polynomial, usually it's represented by this form. Oops, I'll give you a head start. Usually it's represented by this form, and it's not yet an equation. But if I said it was equal to 0, now it's an equation, and it's also a quadratic equation. Pretty simple, right? It's nonlinear because if I threw this on a graph, because this exponent is bigger than 1, it would not be a straight line. So therefore, nonlinear, which we did many, many chapters ago. All right, so far so good. So now let me break this down for you as far as what we're going to do with the quadratic equations. For this chapter, a good majority of it is we're going to take those quadratic equations and we're going to find different ways to solve them. There are 5 ways for us to solve a quadratic equation. The first would be what we're getting into today, which is solving a quadratic equation by our method of factoring, which again you did back in chapter 7. Then we're going to use something called the square roots, completing the square, the quadratic formula, and then finally we're going to use the graphing method. All right, so that's going to take us well into like the next packet. All right, so today we're going to be talking about how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring. So think about how you factored a polynomial. All right, now make sure you have your notes out if you don't already, and I'm going to skip the first page of your notes. That's just kind of to warm you up and get you where you need to be mentally in the spot to factor a quadratic equation. I'm going to skip down to page 2, and it looks like it is underneath activity 2, example 1. And we're going to go through that together. Now, let me write that on the board and then I'll give you the thought I had. So, I'm looking at it sideways. X squared plus 7x plus 12. Okay, now yours actually has it set equal to 0, but I want you to imagine that equal to 0 part is not there. And the reason being is some of your assignments on this handout or handouts to come or assignments to come, it might just be the polynomial and you have to make it into an equation. All right, so the first step that we need to think about is how we're going to make this into an equation. And we need to make sure, one, it's in standard form, which it is, and then two, we're going to set this polynomial equal to 0. If it's already set equal to a number, that's great, don't touch it. All right, now our second step, and I know this isn't step by step in your notes, so write this down if it's helpful. Our second step is we're going to factor the polynomial that we've been given. All right, so I know that I'm going to have two binomials. I'm just going to drop down this equals 0 part, and it'll become important in a minute. And then I have, this is going to be x plus 4 and x plus 3. I know this because 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 plus 3 is also 7. All right, not too bad, right? So I factored it. And now, this is where you guys left off at the last chapter. But now, if I'm saying I want to solve a quadratic equation, I want you to think about this. If I solve an equation, that means I have some sort of solution. I have a value of my variable. You're going to do the same things here. But I'm going to take each one of these binomials and set them equal to 0 individually. All right? So, step 3, we're going to set each factor equal to 0. All right. So I'm going to have x plus 4 equal to 0 and x plus 3 is equal to 0. And then I'm also going to solve in that same step. So this is just a one-step equation. Using the inverse operation, we're going to get x by itself. And then I would get x is equal to -4. Over here, I'm going to use the inverse operation, and I would get x is equal to -3. All right, so right now, I believe that in this particular quadratic equation, x can be equal to -4 and or it can be equal to -3. So my last step would be to write the solution in set notation. All right, so set notation, let me take that off of there, would be if I said x is equal to curly bracket, -4, -3, close curly bracket, meaning that x could be either one of those solutions. All right, and you just figured out the two solutions for x. Not too bad, right? All right, so the very last thing that your notes has, which I always want you to think about doing, especially if you're unsure if you've done the work correctly, is how to check your answer. So I want you to think back to our chapter when we were solving equations. How did we check our answer? We took the solution and we plugged it back into the original equation. And you can do the same thing here to make sure that you've done these things correctly. Now, if I said there were special solutions, obviously that takes us down a completely different road. But let's just consider that these should be the solution. I'm going to take -4 and plug it into this equation. If I get 0 is equal to 0, then I'm good. Same with if I plug -3 in. All right, so I'm going to plug these in just to make sure you're good to go. So I'm going to check -4 first. So I would have -4 squared plus 7 times -4 plus 12 should be equal to 0. So I'd have 16 plus -28 plus 12 equal to 0. Right here, I would have -12. -12 plus 12 is equal to 0. So I'd get 0 is equal to 0, and I'm good. So -4 checks out. All right, now I'm going to check out -3. So I have -3 squared plus 7 times -3 plus 12. this would be 9 plus negative 21 plus 12. Right here, I would have 12 plus, I'd have negative 12 plus 12, and all of these are still equal to 0. These would cancel out, and I would get 0 equal to 0, which means negative 3 is also a solution. All right, so that's not too bad. This method is relatively easy. All right, guys, so now I have a quadratic equation, but I have a quadratic that's not set equal to 0. So that's one thing I didn't mention before. In order for us to factor, we want the right side of our equation to be set equal to 0 for us to do our factoring. All right, so in order for this to be set equal to 0, just like we've done before, we want to move 11 to the left side of our equation. So we're going to use the inverse operation to do that. So when we do that step, we would have x squared minus 10x minus 11, and then this right side would be set equal to 0. And now I have the quadratic equation that I can factor. All right, so this is actually one of the problems in your assignment. All right, then I'm going to follow these same steps. I'm going to factor, set each factor equal to 0, and then once I get a solution, write that solution set in set notation. All right, so again, this assignment, or this method of solving quadratic equations isn't bad, okay? You've been doing these types of things over and over again through the school year. So at this point, I did give you some practice problems. These practice problems are just for your sake. I'm just trying to find them real quick. Well, they're in here. I just can't flip to it. All right, so you have some practice problems. By no means do you have to do all of them. I would suggest doing a few just to get yourself feeling okay after watching the video, reading over the notes, and make sure you feel comfortable with how to do this method. Then your assignment is, that was gross, I'm sorry, this maze. In your task sheet, I think I called it a scavenger hunt. I'm not sure why I did that, but the maze is your assignment. So this would need to be complete and turned in. All right, so you watched the video. Hopefully that feels a little bit more comfortable. Remind yourself that you're just meshing two sections together, and hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you. What you should be doing for your assignment is the maze that's in your packet. It's self-checking, so if you're not getting any answers that are on that maze, please make sure you reach out to me and I will answer any questions that you have. So I hope you feel a little bit more comfortable with this section, and if you have any questions, again, reach out to me. I hope you guys are doing well, and I miss seeing you.